Good evening and welcome to the Stratus and Beat the GMAT webinar. Tonight, despite what you might have gotten in a reminder or seen on the screen, we are talking about how to get into Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton with an imperfect profile. So you are in the right place, and glad to have you with us. As we wait for some more folks to join, I'm going to do a couple quick polls to learn a little bit about who's with us so I can craft our commentary around who is listening. So first off, where are you located? I'm always curious as to where folks are in the world. We're trying a new time of day here with Beat the GMAT to be able to capture hopefully some West Coast folks. We usually do these in the middle of the day, East Coast time, and it's probably right when people on the West Coast are heading off to work in the morning. If you are answering other, and I see that some folks have answered other, in chat, put where you are, because I'm always curious where people are. It's usually Canada or South America, but we've got most people have voted, and we've got 64% east of the Mississippi in the U.S., 27% west of the Mississippi in the U.S., and the rest are other, somewhere else in the world. So I'm curious where you are. I'm going to close that poll. I'm going to ask another, and I'm not sure if this got updated. When do you intend to start an MBA? We were trying to change this poll before we started this webinar, but what I'm seeing looks like it's 2018 or 2019. I'd imagine if you're hoping to start this fall, you have already applied, but no one's actually clicking that. So most people are 2019 or not sure yet. Appreciate your input here. We got 3/4 of you are applying in 2019 and the remainder not sure yet. Let me close that out. And I'm going to ask, let me see, one more poll now, I think, before we move forward. Have you taken your GMAT or your GRE? This is obviously a big piece of the MBA application puzzle. One that you cannot move forward to submit without. So anxious to see where folks are in this process. And we're now in the first full week in March. So you've got about 6 months until the first applications are due. And with most of the votes in here, we've got about 1/4 have taken it and are happy with their score and done. So congratulations to you. About 1/3 have taken it but plan to retake. So at least you've gotten one test out of the way, so good for you. Know where you are, know how you can improve. Still some votes coming in here. 20% no, do I have to take it? That would be me, but I lived and I got my MBA. And the remainder, about 30%, say no, they haven't taken it yet, but they're feeling confident. So thanks for your answers there. Appreciate your responses. We're going to jump in now because we've had a bunch more people join us a little bit late here. Again, you are with Stratus Admissions Counseling and Beat the GMAT. And tonight we're talking about how to get into Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton with an imperfect profile. My name is Susan Cera, and I am here with my colleague, Jennifer Jackson, who's going to introduce herself after I jump back to her slide. And we'll be talking to you guys about what you can be doing. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I'm happy to be here with all of you tonight. So my name's Jennifer Jackson. I am an admissions counselor at Stratus. I went to Northwestern undergrad and got my MBA from Harvard. And then after that, I had some human resources consulting experience, and I've kind of just come full circle with branding. So I started out with the external brand and PR, and then I went into HR consulting with the employer brand and making your company attractive to people working there. And now I get to work with clients on their personal brands. And I absolutely love helping all you guys shape your narratives and help you get into your dream schools.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. And again, I'm Susan Cera. I'm the director of MBA Admissions Counseling at Stratus. I did my undergrad at Dartmouth College, where I studied economics and computer science. I worked for several years in consulting before going to Duke University's Fuqua School of Business to get my MBA. Coming out of there, I did a career change and worked in the software space as a product manager, and then also as a product manager in the internet commerce space for a number of years for several startups and venture-funded companies. I then took a break from my career to focus on my family and started working in admissions committee at Duke, reading applications. And I did that for about a decade. And during that time, I read thousands of applications, some good, some bad, some really ugly. And I realized as I read applications that there were many candidates who I knew in my heart were so much stronger than what they presented through their applications, but I could only evaluate them on what they shared in their applications. And it's for that reason that I came to Stratus. And now I really enjoy working with candidates and helping them to understand what's expected in the process, help them navigate that, and help them present their best selves. With that, a little bit about Stratus. We've been around for a little over a decade, and every year we help hundreds of applicants get into top schools every year. Great ratings on all the places where you see reviews. Some special things that are different about Stratus: we use a team-based approach, just as Jennifer and I are using tonight, the two of us working together to share comprehensive information with you as our audience. When you work with Stratus, you're paired with a primary counselor, so perhaps you sign up to work with us and you might get paired with Jennifer. And at some key points through the process, Jennifer and you would check in with me as your MBA strategist to make sure that you're on track and make sure that your materials are going to resonate with admissions committee. And we also, on our team, have representation from all of the top 20 U.S. programs and some international programs as well. So we're able to offer what we refer to as school-specific reviews, where someone who's not familiar with your background will review just your essays along with your resume and provide feedback that's specific to that particular school that you're applying to. We also have a team of proofreaders who will review your essays and resume right before they're submitted to make sure your punctuation and grammar is all on. And we have a client relationship manager who can serve as your business contact outside of that really tight personal relationship that our clients develop with their counselor, who is their trusted advisor. Another thing that's very unique about Stratus is we offer a 4-school guarantee. If you work with Stratus on a comprehensive package for 4 or more schools, and you are denied at all of the schools you apply to, we will work with you again, either in the following round, if you've applied in round 1 and are unsuccessful, or in the following admission season for no incremental cost to you. So with that, a little bit about, today we're talking about what is a perfect profile. And here's an example. Imagine, if you will, someone who went to Stanford for undergrad, one of the top schools in the country, if not the world, studied in the STEM field, very popular for people going into MBA programs, scored a perfect 800 on the SAT for the math portion, which you can extrapolate from there, expect this individual to do exceedingly well on the GMAT or the GRE. Scholarship athlete, so they know how to balance academics with other activities and perform well in both places. The individual now works as a business analyst at McKinsey. And this individual happens to be an underrepresented minority who would be in high demand for MBA programs. Also is a woman. Again, all the top business schools have been driving up their numbers of women over the years. I'm really dating myself, but when I went to business school, top business schools had 20 to 25% women in their class, and now they're at 30 to 40%, which is fabulous. And this woman also happens to be an Olympic gold medalist. If you have not figured out who this is, it is Maya Dorado. When she is ready to apply to business school after some time at McKinsey, she's pretty much going to be a perfect candidate. She's still going to really have to bring it with her essays and recommendations, but on paper, she looks really pretty good. So what about you? I'm going to ask another poll question here. What do you feel is imperfect about your MBA profile? This poll, you should be able to pick more than one. So if you have more than one what you perceive as a weakness right now, click more than one of these things, and we'll give you guys a little bit of time to respond here to this question. So the options for your weakness are a low GPA, a low GMAT or GRE, too few or too many years of work experience, jumpy work experience, or light leadership and involvement. So I think I'm going to give you guys 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 more second to respond. And what we've got here, we've got about 55% of you say you have a low GPA. There's a great article on our website about how do you overcome a low GPA, so check that out. 64% are concerned about a low GMAT or GRE. 36% are concerned about too few or too many years work experience. If you feel like you're too many, could you raise your hand? I just want to see if there's anyone who's too many, or if you guys are all too few. Just got one person. Nope, 2 people saying too many years work experience. Okay, I just want to know who is with us here, so I can address that. About a quarter say jumpy work experience, and about 20% light leadership and involvement. So thank you for answering that. We're going to walk through kind of all of those areas and then some, and we're going to share with you some examples. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer now. I think I'm doing this part. Areas of evaluation. In my time at Duke, evaluated a lot of applications. And one thing to keep in mind is that there are 2 pieces to being accepted into business school. There's evaluation and there's selection. So schools are going to evaluate you just based on your application. And through that evaluation process, they're going to identify candidates who are interesting to them, as well as capable they feel of doing the work in that program. And then once they look at all those who are kind of qualified candidates, they're going to select from that to create the class with the diversity that they want. All right, so evaluation, then selection. So here are the areas that are typically evaluated. One is academics. The second is work experience or professional experience. The third is leadership and community involvement. The fourth is your recommendations. And the final one is your essays. And we're going to kind of drill down on each of these and speak about specifically what is looked at in these areas, and then share some success stories of clients we've worked with who've overcome an imperfection in each of these areas. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer to talk about academics.
Okay, so by academics, we mean your undergraduate institution, your major there, your GPA, your GMAT or your GRE, and basically all of those together will form the academics section of the evaluation, right? So, and we really tell clients, don't beat yourself up about things you can't change. So your undergrad institution can't be changed. GPA is what it is. You certainly could still change your GMAT, and that's probably an area to focus on. I know in the poll, a lot of you are going to be taking it again, and there's certainly still time to do that, for round 1 of this year. So if any portion of these academics are a weakness for you, like maybe in the quant section, your GMAT isn't as high as you'd like, or in your undergrad transcript, there's not a lot to show as far as math courses or anything like that. There are steps that you can take to address that now, such as taking a class like MBA Math online to show that you're ready for the rigors of the curriculum. But the key is to work on the areas that you can change, but move on from the ones that you can't. So we will go into our first success story here. And this is a client who came to us. He was older. He was an Indian national and an entrepreneur. 660 GMAT, which is fairly low for his demographic. He had mediocre extracurriculars and started thinking about a full-time 2-year program. And when we're working with him, we encourage him to look at all different kinds of MBA programs, because the right fit for you might not be what is sort of the standard full-time 2-year program. It's not the right one for everybody. And so with that research that he did of all these different possibilities at different schools, he determined that the Stanford MSX program, which is an executive program that I think is 15 months, was a perfect fit, and he was accepted there. So he's going to wind up with a degree from Stanford and be set for his next role. So the key there is you can overcome some of these weaknesses by sometimes thinking out of the box about what the best fit might be for you. Okay, so Susan, you're going to go to our next story.
Our next story that we have is, and what you're seeing here are quotes from emails that these clients sent to their counselor or parts of reviews that they posted online. So this particular candidate is someone who had a softer undergrad GPA, kind of outside of the 80% range for Harvard, Wharton, or Stanford. And he did not go to a top undergrad institution. So he made up for that weak undergrad record by nailing his GMAT, where he got a 760. And he took some supplemental coursework also to demonstrate that he was prepared for the academic rigors of the program. From the work perspective, he was able to present that he got promoted every year for the 4 years he had worked. And outside of work, he was actively involved as a Cub Scout, Cub Master for Boy Scouts of America, which enabled him to then reach back into his past and highlight leadership skills that he had started developing when he was a Boy Scout himself years earlier. And so this guy is now at Harvard. That's the very first email at the top is simply, I got in. I think the topic, the subject line of that email was Harvard or HBS. And then within days, we got this next email that he had gotten a call from someone at Booth where he not only got in, he was offered a Kilt's Marketing Fellowship, which is typically a full ride merit scholarship and also provides the opportunity for the marketing fellows to be paired with a CMO from a top company to be their mentor for their 2 years at Booth. So a great outcome for someone who had that weakness in their profile of softer undergrad GPA. So moving forward, we talked about academics. Now let's talk about professional experience. Now, professional experience is going to capture a number of things. It's going to capture not just how many years of experience you have, but the quality of the work experience. You know, schools are going to be looking at the company or organization that you've worked for, what roles and responsibilities you've had, your career progression. Have you perhaps been promoted ahead of your peers? They want to be able to assess your experience in managing people, projects, or budgets. And they also want to know the impact of your contributions. So did you create some new changes in supply chain that drove down costs by 20%, or that shortened the delivery times by 30%? As much as you can quantify your professional experience, that is great. They also want to know what skills and knowledge that you have developed that you will leverage during your MBA program through till whatever short-term goal you have post-MBA. And finally, schools now more than ever are looking for candidates who have some global experience or realize that this is a piece that's missing in their profile, because more than ever, organizations are truly global. So I think I'm going to share an experience here. This is a client we worked with last year who is a little bit of an unlikely MBA candidate who had a PhD in the sciences and really had very limited formal work experience. She had done her PhD and then was a postdoc for a number of years, so in a research lab. When she came to us, she's like, I don't really have any work experience, but we were able to help her reposition the time that she had spent in her postdoc lab as leadership experience, as she was leading some of the more junior researchers in her lab. And then she proceeded to get in her lab, kind of spun out a product, and she was involved in that. So things that she did not think were very important, we were able to draw out into her narrative. And her background, she had patents, she had, really specific scientific knowledge in an area that is poised to take off. And an MBA was a great opportunity for her to be able to move into the healthcare space, specifically around investing in healthcare ventures. And she is now in her first year at one of these three schools that we're talking about. So a great outcome for her, and something to keep in mind is that postdoc work that she did is truly work experience if you can position it effectively in your application. And with that, Jennifer is going to talk to you about another client that we worked with.
Okay, so this client came to us with quite strong stats, an Ivy League background, worked in investment banking like a lot of applicants. And even these candidates who look really good on paper need to find a way to stand out. He had left his investment banking job and started a company making a specialty food item, which really got him out of his comfort zone, and he learned a lot, but the company failed in less than 2 years. And he was really concerned about how that would look. So, we talked earlier about jumpy work experience. So that company failed. He then joined the C-suite of an agricultural company, producing another specialty item, again, out of his comfort zone. He was in rural Pennsylvania instead of New York City. And these different types of experiences after the investment banking really gave him a chance to learn and grow, and he ended up becoming a much stronger candidate with the narrative that was so much more compelling. And business schools really are interested in seeing how you've learned and grown from mistakes and failures too, because it's definitely a big part of life. And if you can show how it's affected you and how you've grown as a result of whatever has happened, you're going to wind up being a stronger candidate than someone who can't show that. So we were able to help him with creating that compelling narrative and connecting the dots of these different jumpy work experiences he had. And he was accepted to and is at HBS now.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. I think you're going to now talk about, or am I going to talk about this? No, I'm going to talk about leadership and community involvement. So leadership and community involvement are frequently closely tied. Leadership is clearly a personality trait that top business schools are looking for. After all, they are in the business of grooming future leaders in business and other organizations. The reality is that for many young professionals, there haven't been great opportunities to lead within the workplace. So the opportunities for developing those leadership skills often happen outside of your formal work, perhaps in the form of community involvement, where you can really shine with your leadership experience. There are definitely places within your workplace where you may be able to demonstrate leadership, especially if you work in a space that sucks up a lot of your time and you don't have the opportunity to commit to an outside sort of organization. So let me share some examples of people. I know you guys, there were very few of you who said that you had light leadership and involvement. I'm not sure what you're comparing against, but there are people who are doing like really amazing things in this space. So what you feel, might be light may actually be like almost nothing. In any case, this is an example of a client I worked with who was a varsity athlete in college, so very involved during his time in college. But once he graduated, he was doing virtually nothing. He was just working a lot. The thing is that through sports and having been an athlete all his life, he was very much a team player and a leader and a mentor to younger athletes. So one thing we were able to do, even when he came to us with this weaker profile, was to get him involved through the alumni association of his undergrad institution in opportunities where he was mentoring others. So he could highlight the fact that he was a mentoring and inspirational leader to those who are younger than him, and did that very effectively. And this is definitely something he's looking to do in the longer term. He is now at Stanford Graduate School of Business. So a great outcome for him. He was also accepted at Wharton, Booth, and Kellogg. So despite the fact that he had that weaker leadership profile post-undergrad, he was able to overcome that by making some changes to his profile, even in the last few months before he applied, and then highlighting them. And Jennifer is going to tell you about this next client that we worked with.
Okay, this is a woman we worked with who came to us from Eastern Europe and had zero leadership and community involvement experience. She truly was just someone who worked, came home, worked, and came home. And she really needed some assistance presenting a compelling narrative of how she got educated in the U.S., did her work in London, but was very interested in going back to that Eastern European country and making a big impact there in a critical emerging market. So she needed to show the narrative that, hey, I need to go to business school to gain the skills to help me make that impact and help people in my home country. And so we worked with her to highlight her strengths, which, were she had good stats, she had strong work experience, but minimize those weaknesses. And we were able to do that. And she put forward very strong applications and was accepted to Wharton.
And one thing I'll point out here is, people talk about the magic of admissions consultants. We can't necessarily work magic, but part of what magic is all about is the redirecting of attention. So if there is a weakness in your application, you don't in some instances, you might want to call attention to that, because that might be an area for development that an MBA is going to help you to address. There are other times where the magic that we work is basically refocusing an admissions committee's attention onto your strengths so that they do not focus on what might be lacking from your application. And with that, I'm going to go back to Jennifer, who's going to talk about essays and recommendations.
Okay, so essays and recommendations are where we're really starting to put all the pieces together. So what are your short and long-term goals? Why do you need an MBA? And why do you need it at this particular program? So the essays are going to be a place where you can highlight that. And the essays and recommendations are areas where you'll be illustrating your key themes about your candidacy, kind of going back to that personal brand, and just kind of connecting all the dots. And one example of where the recommendations really helped somebody stand out was a client we worked with who came from private equity. He had good stats, but not fabulous. And in some ways, some of these private equity guys are just a dime a dozen. There are a million of them. And how do you stand out? So he didn't really have a lot of outside extracurriculars, except he did work with a partner in forming a clothing business. And he was able to work on the business plan, and he took on an entrepreneurial role in that. And he was kind of interested in retail, and some of his private equity experience was most of it actually was coming from the retail side. And so he was able to show that he had that extra experience. And as far as the recommendations, it's critical to pick people that will show different sides of you. If you can, not everybody can. But in this case, he was able to leverage the president of this company that he was working with to write one of his two recommendations. And he certainly could have had two from his stellar private equity experience across a couple of different companies. But they would have said largely the same things about him. And this woman was able to really show a different side and completely complement and round out his story. And so it's just important to think of recommendations as another way to show that you have different dimensions to you. Okay, Susan?
All right. I'm clicked on the wrong thing. Here we go.
Okay, so another story we have here is a client who came to us. He was Indian. He had a 3.3 GPA, 710 GMAT, highly overrepresented pool of applicants. He had good work experience in banking and private equity. And this was an example of where the narrative was so key. It wasn't just, I'm coming from banking and private equity. These are my development areas. This is why I need an MBA. He was able to show how important it was for him to be investing for impact in order to make a difference in the area of India that he came from. And he wanted to invest in companies in the future that would help a lot of people that have been left behind by the economy. And so that narrative, which was shown across his essays, really helped him stand out. And he, as a result, became somebody that the admissions committees wanted to root for. He wasn't just another banking or private equity guy who wanted to go to business school because everybody else does. He needed these skills in order to be able to learn enough about how to invest in the right companies that will really make a difference in a place that he really cared about. And he is also now at Wharton. And I did forget to say the other client has interviewed at Wharton and is still waiting to hear. And then this client is at Wharton now.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. And one more example here. This is a guy who came to us super concerned because he kind of overdid himself a little bit as an undergrad. He was working part-time, taking classes. He was involved in the crew team, and his grades suffered as a result. He definitely, if you read this is the review that he wrote about us, that Stratus diagnosed his weak points and laid out areas to improve them in ways that he had not really even contemplated. But he was also a history major undergrad and was working in sales, so was not demonstrating, quantitative strength. And through his essays, we were able to paint this picture of him as someone who was in sales and was getting an MBA not to leave sales, but to return to sales and move up from being in sales to a C-suite position out of that. And in addition to his kind of regular essays that were required for the schools he applied to, we helped him craft an optional essay that explained what he was doing during his time as an undergrad, which impacted his grades. He took some online classes and was able to demonstrate that he was prepared for the quantitative rigor that was going to be thrown at him. We even had him put in, use some informal recommendations outside of the two that were required to highlight some other things about him that would be important for admissions committee to know. And those recommendations came from people who were alumni of the programs he was applying to. And he is now at Stanford which is a great outcome for overcoming those stats that he was super nervous about. And with that, this is an example of someone whose profile, perhaps on the surface, doesn't look imperfect at all. But, you know, an Asian national, working in computer science, good stats, some good involvement, but nothing, you know, crazy and involved. And someone who was looking to transition from being a software product manager or program manager into an entirely different space in transportation. And what was really important for him was creating this narrative around his passion for transportation that went back to his college days, and how he wanted to take what he had learned in computer science and technology and apply that into the transportation industry. And again, putting all those pieces together in his essays was instrumental in landing him a seat at HBS, and he's in the joint program that's brand new this year of a master's in engineering and an MBA, because he has stuff he still needs to learn on the engineering side to be able to make that transition into the transportation space. So great outcome from him. You know, this is the email he sent the day he found out, not really sure that it sunk in quite yet that he had been accepted to Harvard. So super excited that he'll be starting there later this year. And with that, how can Stratus help you to create your success story? Now is really the time to start your transformation. I love this cartoon because there are so many people who come to us as reapplicants because they're, no, I got this myself, I can totally do it. And the reality is you don't know what you don't know. And this is a grueling process that takes months, and you want someone on your side who's going to help you through it and guide you. So, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about Stratus's team-based approach. We have a proven methodology where we spend time up front going through exercises of introspection and self-reflection to help you draw out your goals so you know where you want to go. We have a great team of counselors who are supportive and responsive and insightful. And because we have this team-based approach, each counselor is able to leverage the collective wisdom of dozens on our team. And that experience on the team is not only across schools, but across functions, across industries, and even across geographies. So great insight that we can share. So if you are ready to take that next step and you want to be going to business school in 2019, now is really the time for you to get started. Learn how Stratus can accelerate your transformation so you can become one of these success stories and overcome an imperfect profile. So what you should do, contact us to have a free profile assessment, about a 30-minute call with one of our counselors. Go to our website to stratusadmissionscounseling.com R1 Success, sign up there for a consult, or simply email your resume and your target schools to consult@stratusadmissions.com. And if you complete your consult by next week, our colleague Brendan Young, and that's who you're going to hear from. If you see an email from Brendan, do open it. It is information that will be valuable to you. But if you get that consult scheduled by next week, Brendan will give you a customized discount for having been part of this webinar. And with that, I know I saw some questions come in while we were talking, but I am going to open it up for some questions here that Jennifer and I will be able to answer. Let me pop out my questions here. Michael wants to know what would be considered a low GPA. So a low GPA is kind of anything outside of the 80% range for a particular school. So there's an article on our website of, I've got a 2.7 GPA. Is that like a showstopper for me in getting an MBA? The reality is you've got a 2.7 GPA. That's well outside of the 80% range for Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton. And in fact, probably every year there's someone with a 2.7 who gets into these schools. The average GPA at Stanford is something like 3.7. So if you do the math here, you'll figure out that if you have a 2.7 and Stanford needs to maintain a 3.7 average, they have to admit 4 people with a perfect 4.0 to make up for someone with a 2.7. You got to give them a reason to take that 2.7.
I would just add. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jennifer.
I would just add also that where you went to school has something to do with it too, as well as what you majored in. So it's all schools are not necessarily equal and all majors are not equal. So maybe if your major was in engineering, your GPA could be a little bit lower than if you were perhaps a sociology major. So it's not super black and white in that way.
Yes, absolutely. And Michael also wanted to know what would be considered a low GMAT. Again, look at those 80% ranges. If you are outside of the 80% range on the low end of your GMAT, that would definitely be considered low. And keep in mind, demographics matter. There are certain areas of the world that typically have higher GMAT. So if you are from one of those places, it's kind of expected that you're going to bring a GMAT score that is higher than the average for those schools. All right. We've got a question of what's the price range we're looking at? I'm guessing that's for working with Stratus. Our comprehensive packages start at about $4,600 for one school, and incremental schools are significantly less than that. So you can get a 4-school package for roughly, I'm going to say, $7,900, and that comes with that 4-school guarantee. Gary wants to know, how can we address not having enough work experience? Is 2 years at matriculation too little? There are really no hard and fast rules, Gary. Addressing not having enough work experience sometimes means waiting another year to apply, or it means expanding the list of schools you're applying to schools that have a broader range of years of work experience. Or it means demonstrating that you in 2 years have accomplished what most people take 4 or 5 years to accomplish. So if you've been promoted way ahead of schedule, if perhaps you worked full-time during your undergrad, perhaps you started a business, these are all things that can demonstrate your professional experience. And maybe those 2 years are not, it's not the only thing that's being evaluated. It's not just the quantity of years, it's the quality of the work that you've accomplished during that time. So hopefully that answers your question. We've got a question. Someone asked, we had some sent in earlier asking, I'm one of these people who's still working on my GMAT. Is it too early to get started with Stratus? And I'll let you take that one, Jennifer.
Okay. It's definitely not too early. We love when people come to us early in the process because we have the time to spend with them and it's a lot less stressful on the client's part. So you might spend some time on self-reflection and introspection. 80% of your application time might be working on that for a few weeks or close to a month, depending on your work schedule. And then maybe you need a break and 20% of your time is studying for the GMAT at that time. And just depending on when you have it scheduled and whether you're doing a class or working with a tutor, we work with you to figure out when to ramp up with our work and when we can step back. And when we have a little bit more time with you, starting, March and April for round 1, it's so much easier on the client side because you also have full-time jobs and probably not much of a social life for a while. And there's just so much to do, so many moving parts, and we help you work through that and kind of figure out when to step on the gas and when you can step off maybe for a little bit and really focus on the test.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. we've got a question here. Are these candidate profiles detailed somewhere else? Honestly, we are very sensitive to the privacy of our clients, so these are not called out somewhere else. This individual wanted to know, would be really helpful to know what their backgrounds are, education, work experience, etc., to determine the strong from the fabulous. So, we shared kind of as much as we are able to share without divulging the identity of these individuals. Suffice to say, these are not people, we're not able to take a 500 GMAT and a 2.5 GPA from a school that no one's heard of and get you into Harvard. We can't work that sort of magic. We can work with what you have and redirect attention to your strengths, but you need to come with some baseline background. Excellent. Well, I think, let me just scroll through here. I sometimes miss questions. I want to make sure that I go back and see any that people may have entered while Jennifer and I were talking. And I want to, if you have personal questions, feel free to reach out for the consult and we can talk to you about your personal situation. And this is not necessarily the best forum for individual questions about your profile. This is a very interesting question. Can you tell us a little bit of why some applicants get disgruntled with admissions counselors? What makes a good client versus a bad client? I'm gonna answer this. I'm gonna ask Jennifer to answer it as well. So a reason why some applicants get disgruntled with admissions counselors is that we've had clients who came to us and said, well, wait a minute, aren't you gonna write my essays for me? And no, we're not gonna write your essays for you. Aren't you gonna give me sample essays that I can just kind of work from and make them my own? No, I'm not gonna give that to you. This needs to be your work. So that's why, some people are expecting the work all to be done for them. And that's why some people get disgruntled about an admissions counselor. What makes a good client versus a bad client? I've coached sports for years, and there are people who come with different levels of ability. And I say the same thing to my MBA clients as I said to young soccer players that I've coached over the years. If you listen and you follow my instructions, we are going to be fine. So if you are coachable, you can make a great client. Someone who feels they are right all the time as a client does not make a good client. I've had people who think that, they know better than me. I said, well, you know what? I've read thousands of applications. You are writing applications for the first time. But my friend said this and he got into Harvard. Well, that's great. That's one data point. I've read thousands of applications. So I look for clients who are going to trust me and my experience to guide them through this process. And Jennifer, I'll let you answer that as well. Good clients versus bad clients.
Yeah. So a good client is willing to put in the work that we're going to ask them to do. And you kind of only are going to get out of it what you put in it. So when we go through what I find to be a fascinating and really interesting process of introspection and self-reflection, if you cut corners there and we ask you about different experiences in your life and you say, I used to play soccer, so I'm good at teamwork. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a lot more thinking about what matters to you, what motivates you, all that. And when you do that, it gives us the ability to work with you to find those nuggets, those really critical pieces that might be from when you were a teenager maybe, or in college. It might not be something you're thinking about right away, but that might be what kind of winds its way into your essays. And we don't know if you don't put in the work to do that fundamental building block piece in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Jennifer on that. I like to think of the work that we do with our clients as being, working on, a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And you don't just put the puzzle together without finding, kind of what all the pieces are and starting to sort through them and move them into different areas to, figure out what the picture is that you're drawing. And so we really need the client to be open with us and, share their personal stories. I had a client I worked with this past year who one of her lead stories was something that had happened to her when she was 7 years old. It was a family tragedy that really shaped who she was and what she valued, and what's very important to her. And if she hadn't shared that with me when she and I first started working together, we would have talked about community and collaboration and helping others in entirely different ways than we were able to talk about when she shared how her neighborhood had come together after her family had a family tragedy and what that meant to her. All right. I think we've got time for one or two more questions here. How often do you get international clients outside the U.S.? And statistically, how many of your international clients have got into Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton? Outside of the U.S., we absolutely have them all the time. I actually ran some numbers just recently to figure out how many different countries we've worked with clients from, and it was 50. It was crazy. I personally have worked with clients, I think from, not from Antarctica, but from every other continent. I've worked with clients from countries where I was like, where exactly is that? So, clients from all over the world. And we are not able to share the stats on how many of our international clients have gotten into Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. Quite a few of the examples that we shared here were international clients who will be going to these schools. So I think actually perhaps about half of them, of the stories that we shared, were international clients. And that's about probably about half of our clients are international. So there's the balance. So hopefully I answered your question, Raheem. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. I thank you guys for joining us this evening, taking time out of your day. And I encourage you to I'm going to go back to the slide that has the URL on it. If I can, maybe I can't. Here we go. Start your transformation now. So go to stratusadmissions.com/R1success, fill out that consult form. You'll hear from Brendan Young to get some time set up to speak with perhaps myself, perhaps with Jennifer, perhaps with someone else on our counseling team who might be a better fit for you. We do look forward to talking to you and helping you to become one of the Stratus success stories that we're sharing 9 months from now, around Christmas time. So I wish you all the best on this journey. Do not get down on having an imperfection in your profile. We can absolutely help you overcome that. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye.